Good morning and welcome to the July 29th, 2019 Utah Division of Drinking Water webinar. This is Colt Smith in Rachel Cassidy's office while Rachel is on a much-deserved vacation. We apologize for the delay in starting today, but Rachel did need to remote into her computer to approve our timesheets, and us getting paid is a high priority for all of us involved here at the Division of Drinking Water. We'll be able to broadcast shortly. We're ready to start. We have Luke. How do you pronounce your last name?
Treutel.
Treutel. I've said it wrong every time.
It's all right.
I will probably continue to do so, but I can play this video back and check it. Luke Treutel is with us today to talk about his new role as the lead and copper rule manager and a couple of implementation changes that we're making with that going forward. It's of vital importance that you pay attention today because this is a big change coming to regulated communities in Utah. And so being on top of that is one of the reasons we really promote these webinars. Just a couple of quick updates and some upcoming trainings. August 1st, the IPS 2020 Roadshow continues in Mount Pleasant, Utah. This is hosted by the Utah Rural Water Association in partnership with the Utah Division of Drinking Water. If you have not attended one of these, make it a priority to do so. If you're unable to attend one of these, make it a priority to watch every IPS 2020 webinar that we have. We just conducted, I was at the first one of these we did in Cedar City, Utah earlier this month, and the turnout was fantastic. We had a great crowd, and the operators and systems that took the time to stick around after the formal presentations were done to get some one-on-one consultations with myself and other members of drinking water staff and rural water staff found it valuable. We were able to go through each of their IPS reports individually and compare how IPS 2020 would impact them. A number of systems thought they had no issues when they showed up at the training and thought everything would be fine. And upon sitting down and going through with us, they realized there really were some changes that could significantly impact their compliance standing. Take advantage of this. This is a big chance for you to not be caught unaware going into next year. Now, most of you are logging in and watching a webinar, so you're generally not the community that we're super worried about because you're proactive and you're engaged in all of the processes that go into running a water system. But tell your friends who aren't on the webinar that they need to check out these IPS 2020 trainings. So anyway, August 1st is the Mount Pleasant training. August 7th is the one here in Salt Lake City. August 13th through the 15th, there is a cross-connection control administrator certification training program going on in Spanish Fork. If you need to know what that is, check out Gary Rager's cross-connection control webinar, where he talks about the changes that are going into the cross-connection control program and the need for a cross-connection administrator and what that could entail for your system. I think that was 2 months ago, but you can just look through our playlist and find the one that's cross-connection, and that'll go ahead and lay that out for you. August 26th through the 29th is the Utah Rural Water Association Fall Conference in Layton, Utah. There's also a cross-connection control administrator certification training and event happening at that conference. I didn't post it twice, but that is also going on at that same fall conference in Layton. This is a slightly smaller conference than the one that happens in St. George, but great opportunity for CEUs, great opportunities to learn what's going on with water and running a water system in Utah. Because it is smaller, you can get a little more one-on-one time with people and ask some questions, meet new members of the Utah Division of Drinking Water, get in touch with those people and make those connections. September 19th, there is an AWWA, American Water Works Association Intermountain Section, and RCAC, Rural Community Assistance Corporation, Small Systems Workshop in St. George. You can check details on that on their websites. And then September 19th also, there is an AWWA Small Systems Workshop in Woods Cross. So on both ends of the state, you can check in. Those are free trainings offered by AWWA and RCAC, two of our other partner organizations that do a lot of great work here in Utah to maintain water quality and protect public health. They're generally just great opportunities for you to get in and know what's going on. So that brings up all of our announcements and upcoming trainings. It's, of course, lead and copper sampling season. I normally would remind you of that, but Luke is going to do that heavily for the next 30 minutes. It's also DBP sampling time. We're coming up end of a quarter. So start on that. Look at all your quarterly sampling, seasonal systems. If If you're open for the summer and you haven't taken a nitrate yet, it's getting close to closing time. I know it feels like we just started, but make sure you've got all those annual samples done for you seasonal systems. But with that, we turn it over to Luke. Luke.
All right, thank you, Colt. As Colt mentioned, I will be talking about the lead and copper rule today, and specifically some implementation changes, some things we'll be tracking and things you need to know this year and coming into next year. So again, my name is Luke Treutel. I'm the new lead and copper rule manager. I've been with DDW for just over a couple months now. Before that, I was with the Division of Air Quality. So we probably did not cross paths when I was up there. But before that, I was in Wisconsin, where I worked in public health and drinking water. And you can tell from my photo here, I've got the Wisconsin hat on and I've got the Midwestern accent that might come through. So if you have any questions about lead and copper rule or anything I discussed today, you can definitely give me a call or email me. My contact information is on this slide. It will also be at the end of the presentation. All right, so before we get started, I want to lay out some acronyms. We have so many in drinking water. So the first one is just DDW, the Division of Drinking Water. You've probably seen that one a lot. The lead and copper rule, we use LCR. SSP is a sampling site plan. I'll go over that later, as well as EPN, which is Enhanced Public Notice. The LCNT stands for the Lead and Copper Consumer Notice or the Lead and Copper Consumer Notification. Those are sort of interchangeable. But I've underlined that one because there's a significant change with how we're implementing and kind of tracking that I really want to put on your radar. So that's one of the big takeaways from this webinar, is to understand that and the changes in what you need to do. The lead and copper rule has action levels. So that's AL, and an ALE is an action level exceedance. And also IPS is improvement priority system. So I'll mention IPS points. And then the lead and copper rule has some slight differences, whether you're a community system, I'll abbreviate that as COM, or a non-transient, non-community system, NTNC. The lead and copper rule does not apply to the transient non-community systems, but I imagine most of you tuning in are with communities or non-transients. Okay, so here's an outline for what I'm going to go through today. I'll give you some background about lead and copper in general, some history of the lead and copper rule so we kind of know how we got here, an overview of how the lead and copper rule works. If you have been managing the lead and copper rule for your system, you're probably familiar with a lot of this and the challenges that come along with it, because it is a different rule than a lot of the other ones that you have to deal with. But if you're new to this or you haven't done LCR monitoring before, this should give you a good introduction to that. And then I will also be talking about the consumer notice, which I highlighted before, the LCNT, because there are some changes with how we're going to be looking at that. All right, so just some lead and copper background so we understand why it's important and why we care about it, why there is a lead and copper rule. So as you all probably know, there's a lot of different uses for lead and copper. Throughout many hundreds of years, we've been using lead in construction. It's been used in plumbing, going back to the Roman aqueducts, which I have a picture of here. And also lead has been put into paint, lead-based paint. We're kind of dealing with a lot of issues coming from that. Lead was added to gasoline for many years. So I'm sure you've heard about that. And then also copper, of course, used in plumbing, and also electrical work, and a lot of it's used in cookware. So these are very widespread, and they're great products for great materials for a lot of things, but they carry negative health effects, and that's the issue, and that's why we have a lead and copper rule. So lead really affects the central nervous system. It can lower IQ, lead to behavioral problems, and young developing children are especially vulnerable to the impacts of lead and lead poisoning. And copper also has its own issues, some gastrointestinal issues, some distress from copper exposure, anemia, kidney and liver function can be impaired. So these materials are all over the place. We've been using them for many years, but they can have some really serious negative health effects. And that's why we care. And that's why we want to make sure that our drinking water is safe and isn't containing a lot of lead and copper. All right, so some quick history of the lead and copper rule. It sort of was kicked off by the Lead Contamination Control Act of 1988. That was essentially a ban of putting lead in plumbing products. The lead and copper rule was passed in 1993. There were some minor modifications in 2002 and revisions in 2009. EPA began working on some long-term revisions in 2017. And if and when those become official, and if there's any changes in the rule, we'll definitely be doing another webinar on that, and we'll be rolling that out to tell you what you need to do. But as of right now, we don't have any major changes to announce. So it's probably going to be what you're familiar with if you've done the lead and copper rule in the past.
Did AWEA have, and I know we did some talk on AWEA, did AWEA have any direct impacts to the lead and copper rule itself?
So no major changes that I'm aware of. I know for certain projects, it changes. The AWEA was the America Water Infrastructure Act. Right. I believe that was in 2018. Yeah, so Colt was asking if that's changing the lead and copper rule. It changes how we prioritize certain things. It has a bigger emphasis on low-income communities. So we're seeing that in some of the projects that we're taking on, but the lead and copper changes, I think, are kind of a separate process. All right, so I'll do an overview about how the lead and copper rule works and the steps you need to take as a water system to follow it and meet these requirements to make sure that we're supplying water that is safe for lead and copper to the customers across the state. The first step is going to be to create a sampling site plan, or an SSP. I'll go over this shortly in more depth. The next step is, to collect the samples after you have your sampling site plan. If you are a community system, most systems have homeowners take those out in the distribution system. If you're a non-transient system, you'll take those usually yourself throughout buildings that are within your system. And that's why this rule is a little bit different. For those community systems, you kind of rely on homeowners and residents to collect some samples for you throughout the distribution systems in their homes. I'll go through the sampling protocol later, but that is a challenge to get some homeowners and residents to volunteer to do that and to do it well for you. And once you collect the samples, you send them to the lab and have them analyzed, and you get the results, and the results are shared with the homeowners of your community system or consumers for non-transient systems. And that's the LCNT I mentioned before, sharing those results, letting the consumers know about those results. And then based on those results, if you exceed the action levels, there are some follow-up steps, and I'll go through that in case your system runs into that. All right, so sampling site plans, they are a list of sites where your lead and copper samples are going to be collected. So PB, as I have on the slide here, that is the elemental symbol for lead, and CU is for copper, in case you weren't familiar. And that sampling site plan will include information about those sites. So that might be addresses, locations, date they were built, also information about the plumbing materials, whether it's copper with lead solder, PEX, things like that, to let us know the risk of the building containing lead or copper. And then also it will identify high-risk sites. The lead and copper rules calls those different tiers. I'll go into that in a couple slides here. And then also it asks your sampling site plan should include information about lead service lines. And what's been coming down the pipeline is EPA probably will want to know more about the presence of lead service lines and where they are down the road. That's not anything imminent, but be prepared that you might want to start learning about that. And as you create your sampling site plan, that would be a good opportunity to create an inventory of where those lead service lines are. And that way you're prepared and you can just have that on your records for perpetuity. So just going forward. All right, so a sampling site plan Once you have that created, you can submit it through Waterlink. I'd recommend going back and looking at our January 2019 webinar that our fearless leader, Rachel Cassidy, did. She went through the process of submitting documents to Waterlink. She spelled it out really nicely. So you could submit your sampling site plans there. That's the best way to do it. I will review it, and you'll get an email letting you know if it needs more information or if it meets all the requirements and you're good to go. And it's great to keep that sampling site plan. We'll try to have a copy here, and if you submit it through Waterlink, that helps us a lot. It helps us make sure that we can have a copy, but also the water systems, it's great if you have a copy as well, in case there's turnover or something changes. I get some phone calls about people asking, where should I take my lead and copper samples? So it would be great if the systems had that and they could hold on to that. So you could seamlessly transition and just collect samples when you need to without having to create one. All right, so one piece of sampling site plans are these different tiers. There's kind of a lot going on with this table here, but I just want to highlight that community water systems and non-transient systems, they have slightly different tiers, but really what we're looking at is tier 1 are the highest risk sites that will contain lead and copper. So we're looking at sites that were built between 82 and 88 that have lead pipes, service lines, copper pipes with solder. And then tier 2, that's going to be buildings or multifamily residences for the community systems, lead pipes, service lines, copper pipes with lead solder between 82 and 88. For non-transient systems, it's just buildings, because as a non-transient, you don't really have residences or single family residences or anything like that. So community water systems have a third tier, which would be single family residences with copper pipes with lead solder installed before 83. Non-transients don't have a tier 3. So when you're developing your sampling site plan, we want to have as many tier 1s as we can possibly get. Those are the highest risk to contain lead and copper. And once you've exhausted those, move down to tier 2 and then to tier 3. And if you still have some more sites that you need, you could use representative sites, which are sites throughout the distribution system that are kind of representative of the typical plumbing system. But definitely, we want as many tier 1s as we can. And if you don't have enough or you don't have any, I know some communities don't really have any houses that were built in that time frame, then you just move down the list here. So a question you might have is, how many sites do I need on my sampling site plan? So as a system starts up, they're put on initial monitoring for the lead and copper rule, where you take a higher number of samples. That's going to be this central column here. And it's based on your population size. So you'd collect this many initial monitoring samples for 6 months, and you do 2 rounds of that. And then if those meet the action level, you can move on to reduced monitoring, where you can take fewer samples at annual intervals, such as once a year or every 3 years. Most systems are on reduced monitoring. But when you're creating your sampling site plan, you'll want to have at least the amount of sites that are required in your initial monitoring. So even if you're on once every 3 year samples, and let's say you're a large system, you have over 100,000 population size, and you're taking 50 every 3 years, when you put together your sampling site plan, that should contain 100 sites. So you could move to initial monitoring from reduced monitoring. If you have an AL exceedance, you forget to take samples, you introduce a new source or treatment, and at that point, you want to be ready to collect the required amount of samples. So it's good to have the higher initial monitoring sites, so 100 in this case, and I'd recommend having some extra just in case some people don't want to participate or you can't get all the samples you were expecting. It's good to have some alternates so you can roll with the punches and get all the samples you need, and you're not scrambling at the end of September or the end of the monitoring period to get all your samples in. So how many samples you need, the best way to figure that out is just to check Waterlink. So here's an example, a screen grab I took from Waterlink. you can see that this system needs 10 samples every 6 months, and it'll tell you when those are due. So just check WaterLink for how many samples you need. And if you have any question on that, let us know. We can update that, or if you think there's an error, I can definitely help you with that. So we have several templates you can use to put together your sampling site plan. Those are on our website. I'd be happy to send you some. Some systems have made their own, but just looking at this template quickly, this top portion is just some information about your system, your name, contact information, things like that. And then down here, you'll have a list of your different sites. It's the hardest part is going to be figuring out the type of plumbing, and just getting some people to participate if you're a community system. But I think we have some really nice templates, and systems have made their own, so we can definitely help you with that. And once you have a template, that's what you need to use. You can't use sites that aren't on there. If you do need to change it, let us know. Just do that before you start collecting your samples. All right, so the sample collection procedure for lead and copper samples uses 1 liter bottles. This picture, you can see it's like a wide mouth 1 liter bottle. The samples need to be first draw, so that's after 6 hours of the water not being in use from that tap. So typically people will just take that in the morning after they've been asleep all night and no one's been using that fixture. The best places to take these samples are going to be kitchen or bathroom cold water taps. Don't use the hot water taps. A lot of times those are connected to water softeners, and that's not really what we want to look at. So do not use outside spigots or seldom used taps. Those can give you elevated levels that aren't really representative of what the people are consuming. So I would stick with kitchen or bathroom cold water taps, or if you're a non-transient system, drinking water fountains, things like that. And we have some instructions on our website that are from EPA that can tell people how to collect those samples. It's really not a complicated procedure, but we do see errors with that, and that can impact the results you get. So definitely take a look at those, and you can spell it out really clearly to the people collecting the samples how to do it. And then you can submit those samples to the lab. And after the lab has analyzed them, you'll get some results. So another way the lead and copper rule is unique is instead of having an MCL or a maximum contaminant level, we have an action level, and the lead and copper rule allows you to compare the 90th percentile of your samples to the action level. So essentially what that's doing is it's letting you kind of ignore or throw out the highest 10% of your samples to give you a little wiggle room or leeway, because most systems are taking these from people's homes, and the lead and copper rule and the people who drafted it understood that you don't have control over their plumbing. So you might get some high results, and that's why they allow those highest 10% to be, I guess, not included in this comparison to the action level. So for lead, the action level is 15 parts per billion. For copper, it's higher, 1,300 parts per billion. And you'll compare your results to those levels. And what happens if you exceed those? If you have a lead sample or a 90th percentile of lead over 15 parts per billion, or copper above 1,300, what you need to do. So there's some follow-up actions you'll need to take. We'll spell that out to you. And it's not a violation. There's no IPS points just for exceeding that action level, but you do need to take some follow-up actions. And if you do take the follow-up actions, then you'll be in good shape. It's just if you ignore those, or you don't take those actions, that's when it can become a violation. All right, so now I'll go through some of these follow-up actions if you do have an exceedance for lead or copper. So if you have a action level exceedance, you need to deliver an enhanced public notice to all of your connections. And I'll show you what that looks like. So the enhanced public notice, EPN, this is sort of what it looks like. It's a pretty straightforward form here that you deliver to people. So just the top here, it tells you about, hey, this water system is providing you with results. Here's the results from your lead and copper samples. It explains action levels. It also includes some health effects, which is really, really vital that the consumers understand that. And then it also includes information about how lead and copper gets into water and how you can reduce exposure. That's key what they can do, what their steps should be. They do not want to boil the water. That would just concentrate it and make it way worse. So then at the bottom, there's more information, the contact information for your water system, who they can call, and then a resident signature where they can sign it that they received it. All right, so you deliver that enhanced public notice to all your connections, or if you are a non-transient system, you post that throughout the building and share that with the consumers. You would move to standard monitoring, which is the higher number of samples for 6 months, and you do 2 rounds of that. And then you would also have to monitor the source for lead and copper and water quality parameters. I'll go over water quality parameters, kind of what that means in a second here. But on WaterLink, this is sort of what that would look like. So you would see here lead and copper at your sources. So this would be where your chemical monitoring is. And then here we have another line from WaterLink about the water quality parameters. So if you have wells, it would be from those or sampling stations. If you are consecutive connection and you're getting water from another system, you don't really have your own sources, then you would take those samples from the entry point to your distribution system. So where that water's coming into your distribution system. So more about those water quality parameters. So for lead and copper, we really care about corrosion. So these plumbing products, these pipes, the solder contain lead and copper. And if water is corrosive, it's going to cause those metals to leach into the water. And then that's how people get exposed, because they drink the water that now contains lead and copper. So water chemistry is really important when it comes to lead and copper. So if you do have an exceedance, that's why you monitor the water quality parameters. That includes pH, alkalinity, calcium, conductivity, and temperature. These are pretty simple things to measure. And like pH, for example, if you have heard about what happened in Flint, their main issue was caused by a change in pH when they changed water sources. So pH is really important. And I would say that corrosion is just as much as an important piece of lead and copper rule as the lead and copper that's actually present in the pipe. So we really care about these water quality parameters. So this is what we call the partial water quality parameter list. This is what most of you would be asked to monitor if you did. We do have a full water quality parameters list, and that's pretty much in addition to what was on the last slide, orthophosphate if you use it, or silica if you use it. Most systems don't. So that won't really impact you, but in the rare case that you do use those, that's just another thing that you would monitor because that affects corrosion control. All right, so more about action level exceedances. Besides monitoring for lead and copper at your sources, doing the enhanced public notice, doing the water quality parameters, and going to standard monitoring, there's some other possible outcomes like doing a corrosion control study, lead service line replacement. These aren't as common, but I thought I'd mention them. And if your future samples meet the action level, so if they go down and they're considered safe again, you can go back to reduced monitoring, and that's where you want to stay. All right, so one sort of interesting case would be if you have some sites that exceed the action level, but not your 90th percentile. So let's say you just have one site, one home that has a high lead or copper level. So what you'll do if your community system is just give the enhanced public notice to those people at that specific site. If you're a non-transient system, you would post the enhanced public notice at that location that tested high. So you wouldn't have to do all the steps that I mentioned previously, but you would just resample at those sites that were elevated, that were high. All right, so best case scenario, your results are just below the AL. You don't have any exceedances. This is where we want to be. Thumbs up. You can be on your once every 3 year monitoring, and you don't really have to think about it until your sampling time comes around again. So if your results are below the action level, you can either move to reduce monitoring if you're not there yet, or just stay there. And then you'll share the results with homeowners and consumers where those samples were collected. And this is the LCNT. This is the lead and copper consumer notice. And this is a piece that is a little bit, it's changing how we're implementing it. So I really want to highlight that. right, so what is the LCNT, the lead and copper consumer notice? It is results from the lead and copper sampling shared with the consumers or residents. So if your community system within 30 days, you would share the lead and copper consumer notice with residents. If you're a non-transient, just post it in the buildings and share it with all the consumers. So for example, if you're a business and you're a non-transient system, just all the employees or people who are typically there. And on WaterLink, this is what that would look like. You can see it says LCNT, submit lead and copper certification notice, DDW. So that's what it looks like. You might see that on your WaterLink. So this is what the form looks like, the notice that you would either post or share with the consumers. And it's pretty straightforward. It just says, this water system is providing you with lead and copper test results. The results at this location are this. And then for more information, contact us here, and some information about how lead gets into water. And that's on our website. So this is a bigger priority now, and I think it's important to understand why it matters. So I think just on the face of it, it's important that customers know what the results are for the water they're drinking, especially for community systems. If you're taking a sample from someone's home, you should share that with them. What is it? They want to know. And public notification can really help build your relationship with the customers. So if you take a sample at someone's home, I think it's really important that you share those results with them. I think transparency is really important. If they don't hear anything, they don't see anything, they might fear the worst, and that's not good for their trust in you or their trust in the water that's coming into their home. And also, just public notice is a bigger emphasis for us here at DDW and also EPA, with events around the country and just some rule changes. Just letting the public know, it's just vital, and it's not that difficult. So I don't think it should be an especially hard requirement, but it is really important. So once you've given out that LCNT, the lead and copper consumer notice, to your consumers, you have to let us know that you did it. That's how we can check that box and know that you met the requirement. So there's 3 ways to do that. The first and best way is to submit a document through WaterLink. I'll show you the document you can submit that pretty much says, hey, I supplied the LCNT to the consumers. So that's the best way. Again, the January webinar goes through how to submit documents through WaterLink. That's a great way to do it. That's the best way. We also have an online Google form that Colt helped us set up. I'll show you what that looks like. You can also email it to ddwreports@utah.gov. If none of these work for you, let me know. We'll figure it out. But again, submitting the document through WaterLink is the best, but there are some other options that you have to let us know that you delivered this to the consumers. All right, so here's what the certification form looks like. There's a lot here. I don't expect you to read it. I'm not going to leave it up here long enough for you to have time to read it. It's on our website, lcr.utah.gov, and it's pretty much gives you the requirements, and then at the bottom you can check a box saying that you deliver these consumer notices to the water users, and then you sign it, write your water system number, and then, like I said before, you can submit that to WaterLink. And as you hopefully already know, waterlink.utah.gov is the place to go to find everything. Create a portal account. That's an awesome way to be able to manage your system through WaterLink. And again, see that January 2019 webinar that Rachel put on. That's really helpful to understand WaterLink and how to submit documents. So another option besides submitting a document through WaterLink is to complete the online Google form. So here's a small URL you can use. I'll show you what it looks like, tiny.cc/leadcopper. And what that looks like is it's really just a few basic questions. What's your water system? What's the date today? What type of system are you? And did you deliver the consumer notices? And then you just type your name at the bottom and submit, and then I'll get a notification that you did it. All right, so those are the first two ways. And then, of course, you can email ddwreports@utah.gov. You're probably familiar with that email address. You can send a lot of things there. We have multiple staff checking that. So that's a good email address for general things. All right, so as I mentioned, we're kind of going to be tracking the lead and copper consumer notice differently moving forward. So we'll really begin tracking it in January 2020. So this next year, at the beginning of next year for 2019, we're going to be following up and seeing that if systems did it or not, and they delivered that to their consumers and let us know. We have been tracking it in the past, not as thoroughly as we are going to be. You've probably seen it on WaterLink, but starting in 2020, we'll be really looking at it, beginning in whether or not you did it in 2019. And then in 2020, it's going to be worth 15 IPS points. So that's going to be on your report card. So that is quite a few, but like I said before, I don't think this is especially difficult. So I think this requirement is really manageable, but it's just important that the consumers know what the test results are and just let us know. All right, so I mentioned the LCNT and the EPN, and those are both notices that you share with the public, but I wanted to differentiate the two and let you know the difference. So the LCNT, for community systems, you just give it to customers who had samples taken where they live. And if you're a non-transient, you just post it throughout the building and you share it with people who consume the water there at your system. And this is just for results below the AL. So for EPN, the enhanced public notice, this is for if you exceed the AL at any sites. It goes to all your customers, or if it's just a couple sites and your 90th percentile is okay, then it would just go to specific sites that were high. So really the difference here is that LCNT goes to customers who had samples taken where they live and the results are below the AL. But if the results are high, then you do the EPN, you do the public notice that contains some different information. And then for both, we have templates you can use on our website, or I can supply those with you. Or if you have something you put together, definitely run it by me. I can give you a stamp of approval if you kind of have your own draft you want to use, and then you have to let us know that you did it. All right, so some key takeaways from this. I hope you have a good understanding of how the lead and copper rule works in a general sense. There's more details. I'd be happy to answer any specific questions you have about that. Each system might have different requirements. Again, it's based on population and many different things. It's a more convoluted rule. It's a little more confusing than some other rules, but generally, I hope you understand how it works. And then the other key takeaway is about that lead and copper consumer notice. And again, the purpose of that is just to share those lead and copper sample results with the consumers. They should know what those results are. You need to certify to DDW that you did it. You have to let us know that you did it. If we don't know that you did it, then it's like you never did it. I know that goes without saying, but I have had some people tell me that they did it. Why is this on my WaterLink? But if we don't know, then
I had a former boss who said, if you can't count it, it doesn't exist.
Right.
And we have to have some sort of quantitative value.
Absolutely, yeah. So we have to have a record of that. Again, that's not that difficult. We have some different ways you can do that, and I'll work with you to find out what works best for you within the requirements that we have. The best way to certify to us that you did it is, again, to upload a document, the certification form, to WaterLink. That's that form that says, yes, I checked this box, I gave it to my consumers, and you sign it, put that on your WaterLink. And we'll be tracking this in January 2020, and it's worth 15 IPS points at that point. All right, so here's an overview of our staff here at the rules section. I'm kind of in the middle here, right above Colt's name. Here's my cell phone number. You can call or text me. Any questions you have about the lead and copper rule, I'd be happy to help you put together a sampling site plan, answer any questions about this lead and copper consumer notice. If you have samples coming up soon, and a lot of you do by the end of September, if you have any questions before you go out and do that, definitely give me a call or shoot me an email. I'd be happy to help you figure that out beforehand or whatever else you need. And then, just our rules section manager down here, Rachel. Again, her January webinar was awesome, and we'll help you with those document uploads to Waterlink.
Let her get back from vacation before you bug her.
Right. Yeah.
Bug the rest of us this week.
Yeah, you can bother me.
We need a well-rested Rachel here. We have a question from Matthew Kennedy, friend of the program. Matthew Kennedy, glad I plugged his RCAC training this month. Made sure to get it on the calendar. Do systems receive confirmation of receipt after submitting certification? I know you talk about sending an email if they do it through the portal, but if they do it in any other way, probably not, I'm guessing.
Probably not, because we get so many.
Yeah.
It's really, really hard. So what's cool about using Waterlink is once we approve it, you'll be able to tell on your side, on the system side, that it was reviewed and approved. But I think besides that,
they're allowed to submit it in any way, shape, or form,
Yeah.
but otherwise there's just no way for us to manage if it's coming through in a fax or a hard copy mail certified letter. There's not really that same role for us to, we don't have the staffing power or the computing technology to track and do it. But through the portal, they will be able to see that it's reviewed and track that themselves and have sort of verification that it's done, which is why we said
that's the best way.
It's the best way.
We're going to push that. One other, I guess, way to be able to tell that is on your Waterlink, you would probably have that LCNT requirement that you're supposed to share that with the consumers. Once we receive your LCNT, that should be cleared out. Not immediately, not the day we get it, but I would just say look at your Waterlink once in a while, and if it's been a week or two since you've submitted it and that's still on there, you can definitely follow up with us, and I'll let you know whether it's, oh yeah, I'm about to remove that, or we actually didn't receive it. So that's a really good way to be able to monitor that too.
Absolutely. Jason from Pleasant Grove asks, well, where can I find a copy of this PowerPoint for future reference? I don't know that you have it on the Lead and Copper website, but you are working on a handout to cover this, or?
So we do have a lot of information on the lcr.utah.gov. This is a new presentation,
right?
But I'd be happy to.
We could work to get a PDF version of it.
PDF on there.
Yeah, we can work to get it up on lcr.utah.gov.
Yeah, I think that would be good. And you can always review this webinar recording and just scroll along the time and find the slides that you're interested in. But we can definitely find a way.
And Jason, if he needed one, could probably reach out to you and get you to email him a copy of it, I'm sure.
Yeah.
We're always happy.
From Pleasant Grove?
From Pleasant Grove.
Okay, I'll see if I can just find him on Waterlink.
Yep. So you can always reach out to us for copies of slides, information, handouts that we have. We're happy to push that along until we have it in a better repository. But that's always something you can do, is reach out to us either through email or through phone. Email is probably best, because then Luke has a place to send it back to, especially if you're asking for a copy of a presentation.
Exactly, that's probably best.
All right, I think that's all of our questions.
I'll just go back one slide to reiterate these takeaways one more time. So if you have any questions about how LCR works, you can see our website. You can reach out to me. I'd be happy to help you with that, especially since it's sampling season for most systems. And then for that lead and copper consumer notice, that's just sharing those results with consumers, certifying to us, letting us know that you did it. The best way to do that is to upload a document to Waterlink, and then again, we'll be tracking that starting next year.
All right.
All right. Thanks for tuning in.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you, Luke. As we switch places and I end the broadcast. Thank you all again. The link, we got the questions to Donnie to upload to the quiz, and as soon as I have notification from her that it's live, we'll go ahead and post that link in the comments so you can get your CEUs. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for your patience in our late start this morning. If you have questions, you can always reach out to Luke or any of the Division of Drinking Water staff. We're happy to be here and take any questions and help you through any compliance issues you've got. Thanks again. Join us next month. We don't know who's presenting, but it'll be as amazing as always. Thank you.